Position.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question, without notice, is to the Prime Minister. Given the fact that bond yields have steadily risen since your appearance on the Late Line program last Wednesday, and given the fact that interest rates on fixed-rate mortgages have already risen, do you now concede, as the Treasurer does, that official interest rates will be moving upward, or do you continue to maintain there is no pressure on official interest rates in Australia?
The Honourable the Prime Minister.
It seemed to me that bond yields have moved up all over the world, so the Shadow Treasurer credits me with great influence, I've got to say. My Late Line interview must have travelled far and wide to have this devastating impact on bond yields. Thank you for the compliment. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, there's no doubt that there's no doubt that skittishness in international markets has impacted and does impact into the Australian bond markets, and there has been a view abroad about the prospects of inflation as recovery and strength of economic growth comes through the Western economies. And there has been a view, particularly in the face of very low nominal interest rates, very low nominal and real interest rates in the United States, that monetary policy needed to be shifted. But I made the point the other day, and I think it's worth making again, that at their lowest point, interest rates in the United States fell to 3%. That is the federal funds rate, official rates. The official rate in Australia, the cash rates, fell to 4 3/4. That is 1 3/4 percentage points above that where the United States rates were. Now, the United States there is capacity, they're bumping up now against capacity constraints in the US, both in the labour market and in certainly the train labour market, and in the product markets, and with plant and equipment. And there's been a view in US markets that this will reflect in higher rates of inflation, and this has permeated world markets, and it's had an impact here. But the conditions here, as I said the other evening, that interest rates here for business lending somewhere between 6.5% and 9%, with a real rate of something like 4.5% to 7%, or even if one were to take the gloomy view and say inflation will be higher than 2% in underlying sense, and say 3%, a real rate of 3.5% or 6% isn't easy money. And that's the point the Treasurer has made, and the point that I've made continually and consistently. Now, what the Treasurer has said is, as the recovery picks up and there is a call on savings by the private sector for plant and equipment and other forms of investment, in every other recovery, the price of funds have risen. But they've risen not... He's talking about them rising in this context not because of inflation getting out of control, but because simply of pressure on funds for resources. So that's why, Mr. Speaker, I have made these points. And I don't think the Shadow Treasurer should try and paraphrase the Treasury's remarks as saying, or indicating that some sort of interest rate rise is imminent. I mean, basically inflation has been decelerating. Well, the member for Bennelong makes reference to, he said it's happened, making reference to the two banks who have shifted their rates. Well, there's a lot of competition in the retail banking sector these days, and as a consequence, some rates are decidedly lower than others. And if in the funding of those loans, a bank decides that its fixed lending rate should rise from, I think, 6.9% in the case of one, 6.9 to 7.4. I don't think that the opposition's entitled to say, "Oh, shock horror, the end of the world's coming," from 6.9 to 7.4. I mean, the market, some books will be cast differently, and as a consequence, the lending policies of some banks will be different, and therefore they will lift their rates. But official rates haven't risen. That's the key point. The key point is official rates have not risen, and they have not risen. They have not risen because the government believes that inflation has been checked, and that in fact, from the official statistics, it's actually been decelerating. And in that context, falling in with some sort of market sentiment from the Northern Hemisphere which says inflation's going to be out of control when we've just agreed to another 2 years under the accord of $8 to hold inflation in check, means that the government won't be responding to pressures in the bond markets which are induced from other markets.
The honourable member for Moreton.